Hello? It's the Citrus Club calling. They want to know if we can do a spooky radio show.
Well, I think we should.
Let's do it. Hi, I'm Ellie.
And I'm Blair.
And we're the Citrus Club.
Woohoo, woohoo. Or should I say, ooh. Today, we are bringing you something super fun that we have been working on. We are bringing a radio show / audiobook / spooky podcast episode that is a reading of the classic Edgar Allan Poe story, The Fall of the House of Usher. It is featuring an original composition, come on now, by the famous Brian Bush. Shout out.
We love you, Brian.
Also featuring some amazing actors, our wonderful friends. We have Matthew McCanless, Carlos Enciso, Abigail Brazier, Kate Mullis, and Grace Hayes. They are some fabulous, fabulous people, and they give you a wonderful, wonderful performance for tonight.
And if you enjoy this spooky radio show tonight, we are looking forward to doing something for Christmas as well, so leave us a comment if you enjoy. Are we ready?
Yes.
All right, let's knock on the door of the House of Usher.
Dear listeners, tonight I will tell you of the story of the fall of the House of Ushers. During the whole of a dull, dark, and...
Excuse me, what habitat liver?
I beg your pardon? Who said that?
It's us! Your guardian angel. Your inner monologue. Your all-knowing storytellers. Ta-da!
You're saying my narration of life is a trio of angels that sing in perfect three-part harmony?
Yes!
Oh, okay. But how does...
Are you going to keep asking questions?
Or are we going to tell this story?
The audience is waiting.
Right. Okay. As I was saying, dear listeners, tonight we will tell you of the story
of the fall of the House
of Usher. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy house of Usher.
I know not how it was, but with the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half-pleasurable, poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible.
I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to an after dream, the bitter lapse into everyday life. Here was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime.
What was it? I paused to think. What was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher?
It was a mystery all insoluble, nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. I was forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that while, beyond doubt, there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth.
It was possible that a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify, or perhaps to annihilate its capacity for sorrowful impression, and, acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid farm that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling.
In this mansion of gloom, I now proposed to myself a sojourn of some weeks. Its proprietor, Roderick Usher, had been one of my boon companions in boyhood. But many years had elapsed since our last meeting. A letter, however, had lately reached me in a distant part of the country. A letter from him, which, in its wildly importunate nature, had admitted of no other than a personal reply.
The writer spoke of acute bodily illness, of a mental disorder which oppressed him, and of an earnest desire to see me, as his best and indeed his only personal friend, with a view of attempting by the cheerfulness of my society some alleviation of his malady. It was the manner in which all this and much more was said.
It was the apparent heart that went with his request, which allowed me no room for hesitation, and I accordingly obeyed forthwith that I still considered a very singular summons. Although, as boys, we had been close, I really knew little of my friend. I was aware, however, that his very ancient family had been noted, time out of mind, for a peculiar sensibility of temperament, displaying itself through long ages in many works of exalted art and manifested of late in repeated deeds of munificent yet unobtrusive charity.
I had learned, too, the very remarkable fact that the entire family lay in the direct line of descent, and had always, with very trifling and very temporary variation, so lain. It was this I considered, from sire to son, the patrimony with the name, which had so identified the two as to merge the original title of the estate in the quaint and equivocal appellation of the House of Usher, an appellation which seemed to include, in the minds of the peasantry who used it, both the family and the family mansion.
Shaking off from my spirit what must have been a dream, I scanned more narrowly the real aspect of the building. The discoloration of ages had been great, yet no portion of the masonry had fallen, but there appeared to be a wild inconsistency between its still perfect adaptation of parts and the crumbling condition of the individual stones. Noticing these things, I rode over a short causeway to the house. A servant in waiting took my horse, and I entered the Gothic archway of the hall. A valet, of stealthy step, thence conducted me through many dark and intricate passages, and my progress to the studio of his master.
Right this way.
Much that I encountered on the way contributed, I know not how, to heighten the vague sentiments of which I had already spoken. I hesitated not to acknowledge how familiar was all this. I still wondered to find how unfamiliar were the fancies which ordinary images were stirring up.
On one of the staircases I met the physician of the family. His countenance, I thought, wore a mingled expression of low cunning and perplexity. He accosted me with trepidation and passed on. The valet now threw open a door and ushered me into the presence of his master.
The room in which I found myself was very large and lofty. Dark draperies hung upon the walls. The general furniture was profuse, comfortless, antique, and tattered. Many books and musical instruments lay scattered about, but failed to give any vitality to the scene. I felt that I breathed an atmosphere of sorrow, an air of stern, deep, and irredeemable gloom hung over and pervaded all.
Upon my entrance, Usher rose from a sofa on which he had been lying at full length, and greeted me with a vivacious warmth which had much in it. A glance, however, at his countenance convinced me of his perfect sincerity. We sat down, and for some moments, while he spoke not, I gazed upon him with a feeling half of pity, half of awe. It was with difficulty that I could bring myself to admit the identity of the man being before me with the companion of my early boyhood. Yet the character of his face had been at all times remarkable. Now, in the mere exaggeration of the prevailing character of these features, and of the expression they were wont to convey, lay so much of change that I doubted to whom I spoke.
It was thus that he spoke of the object of my visit, of his earnest desire to see me, and of the solace he expected me to afford him. He entered at some length into what he conceived to be the nature of his malady. It was, he said, a constitutional and a family evil, and one for which he despaired to find a remedy. It displayed itself in a host of unnatural sensations. He suffered much from a morbid acuteness of the senses. He could wear only garments of certain texture. The odors of all flowers were oppressive. His eyes were tortured by even a faint light, and there were few peculiar sounds, those from stringed instruments, which did not inspire him with horror.
I shall perish. I must perish in this deplorable folly. Thus and not otherwise, shall I be lost. I dread the events of the future, not in themselves, but in their results. I shudder at the thought of any, even the most trivial incident which may operate upon this intolerable agitation of soul. I have indeed no appearance of danger, except in its absolute effect, in terror. In this unnerved, in this pitiable condition, I feel that the period will sooner or later arrive when I must abandon life and reason together in some struggle with the grim phantasm, fear.
I learned, moreover, at intervals and through broken and equivocal hints, another singular feature of his mental condition. He was enchained by certain superstitious impressions in regard to the dwelling which he tenanted, and for many years he had never ventured forth.
Much of the peculiar gloom which thus afflicted me could be traced to a more natural and far more palpable origin, a severe and long-continued illness and the loss of a beloved sister. She was my sole companion for long years, my last and only relative on earth. Her disease,
he said, with a bitterness which I can never forget,
would leave me the last, the ancient race of the Ushers.
While he spoke, the Lady Madeline, for so she was called, passed slowly through a remote portion of the apartment, and, without having noticed my presence, disappeared. I regarded her with an utter astonishment, not unmingled with dread, and yet I found it impossible to account for such feelings. A sensation of stupor oppressed me as my eyes followed her retreating steps.
When a door at length closed upon her, my glance sought instinctively and eagerly the countenance of the brother, but he had buried his face in his hands, and I could only perceive that a far more than ordinary wanness had overspread the emaciated fingers through which trickled many passionate tears.
The disease of the Lady Madeline had long baffled the skill of her physicians. A settled apathy, a gradual wasting away of the person. I learned that the glimpse I had obtained of her person would thus probably be the last I should obtain, that the lady, at least while living, would be seen by me no more.
For several days ensuing, her name was unmentioned by either Usher or myself, and during this period I was busied in earnest endeavors to alleviate the melancholy of my friend. We painted and read together, or I listened, as if in a dream, to the wild improvisations of his speaking. I shall ever bear about me a memory of the many solemn hours I thus spent alone with the master of the house of Usher. Yet I should fail in any attempt to convey an idea of the exact character of the studies in which he involved me. Among other things, I hold painfully in mind a certain singular perversion and amplification of the wild air of the last waltz of von Weber.
I have just spoken of that morbid condition of the auditory nerve which rendered all music intolerable to the sufferer, with the exception of certain effects of stringed instruments. It was, perhaps, the narrow limits to which he thus confined himself upon the guitar which gave birth, in great measure, to the fantastic character of the performances. The words of one of these rhapsodies I have easily remembered. I was perhaps the more forcibly impressed with it as he gave it, because in the under or mystic current of its meaning, I fancied that I perceived, and for the first time, a full consciousness on the part of Usher.
These verses, which were entitled The Haunted Palace, the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tend.
By good angels tenanted.
Once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head in the monarch thought's dominion. It stood there. Never seraph spread a pinion over fabric half so fair, all with pearl and ruby glowing was the flare.
discordant melody, like a ghastly rapid river through the pale door. Hideous throngs rush out, forever last, but smiles no more.
I could not help thinking of the wild ritual of this work, and of its probable influence upon the hypochondriac. Days passed when, one evening having informed me abruptly that the Lady Madeline was no more, he stated his intention of preserving her corpse for a fortnight in one of the numerous vaults within the main walls of the building.
I have been brought to this resolution by consideration the unusual character of the malady of the deceased, of certain obtrusive and eager inquiries on the part of medical men, and of the remote and exposed situation of the burial ground of the family.
At the request of Usher, I personally aided him in the arrangements for the temporary entombment. The body having been encoffined, we two alone bore it to its rest. The vault in which we placed it, and at which had been so long unopened that our torches, half smothered in its oppressive atmosphere, gave us little opportunity for investigation, was small, damp, and entirely without means of admission for light, lying at great depth immediately beneath that portion of the building in which was my own sleeping apartment.
The whole interior of a long archway through which we reached it were carefully sheathed with copper, the door of massive iron and been also similarly protected. Its immense weight caused an unusually sharp, grating sound as it moved upon its hinges.
Having deposited our mournful burden upon trestles within this region of horror, we partially turned aside the yet unscrewed lid of the coffin and looked upon the face of the tenant. A striking similitude between the brother and sister now first arrested my attention.
We had been twins.
The disease which had thus entombed the lady in the maturity of youth had left, as usual in all maladies of a strictly cataleptical character, the mockery of a faint blush upon the bosom and the face, and that suspiciously lingering smile upon the lip which is so terrible in death.
We replaced and screwed down the lid, and having secured the door of iron, made our way, with toil, into the scarcely less gloomy apartments of the upper portion of the house.
Some days of bitter grief having elapsed, an observable change came over the features of the mental disorder of my friend. His ordinary manner had vanished. His ordinary occupations were neglected or forgotten. He roamed from chamber to chamber with hurried, unequal, and objectless step.
The once occasional huskiness of his tone was heard no more, and a tremulous quaver, as if of extreme terror, habitually characterized his utterance. It was no wonder that as his condition terrified, it infected me. I felt it creeping upon me. By slow yet certain degrees, the wild influences of his own fantastic yet impressive superstitions.
It was especially upon retiring to bed late in the night of the 7th or 8th day after the placing of the Lady Madeline within the donjon that I experienced the full power of such feelings. Sleep came not near my couch, while the hours waned and waned away.
I uplifted myself upon the pillows, and, peering earnestly within the intense darkness of the chamber, hearkened. I know not why, except that an instinctive spirit prompted me to certain low and indefinite sounds which came through the pauses of the storm, at long intervals. I knew not whence. Overpowered by an intense sentiment of horror, unaccountable yet unendurable, I threw on my clothes with haste, for I felt that I should sleep no more during the night.
There was a species of mad hilarity in his eyes, an evidently restrained hysteria in his whole demeanor. His air appalled me, but anything was preferable to the solitude which I had so long endured, and I even welcomed his presence as a relief.
And you have not seen it? You have not then seen it, but stay, you shall.
Thus speaking, and having carefully shaded his lamp, he hurried to one of the casements and threw it freely open to the storm. The impetuous fury of the entering gust merely lifted us from our feet. It was, indeed, a tempestuous yet sternly beautiful night, and one wildly singular in its terror and its beauty.
A whirlwind had apparently collected its force in our vicinity. for there were frequent and violent alterations in the direction of the wind, and the exceeding density of the clouds, yet we had no glimpse of the moon or stars, nor was there any flashing forth of the lightning, but all terrestrial objects immediately around us were glowing in the unnatural light of a faint, luminous, and distinctly visible exhalation which enshrouded the mansion.
You must not, you shall not behold this. These appearances which bewilder you are merely electrical phenomena, not uncommon. Or it may be that they have their ghastly origin in the rank miasma of the tarn. Let us close this casement. The air is chilling and dangerous to your frame. Here's one of your favorite romances. I will read, and you shall listen. And so we will pass away this terrible night together.
The antique volume which I had taken up was The Mad Trist, of Sir Lancelot Canning, but I had called it a favorite of Usher's more in sad jest than in earnest. It was, however, the only book immediately at hand, and I indulged a vague hope that the excitement which now agitated the hypochondriac might find relief. I might well have congratulated myself upon the success of my design.
I had arrived at that well-known portion of the story where Ethelred, the hero of the tryst, having sought in vain for peaceable admission into the dwelling of the hermit, proceeds to make good an entrance by force. Here, it will be remembered, the words of the narrative run thus.
And Ethelred, who was by nature of a doughty heart, and who is now mighty withal on account of the powerfulness of the wine which he had drunken, waited no longer to hold parley with the hermit, feeling the rain upon his shoulders, and fearing the rising of the tempest, uplifted his mace outright, and, with blows, made quickly room in the plankings of the door for his gauntleted hand.
At the termination of this sentence I started, and for a moment paused, for it appeared to me that from some very remote portion of the mansion there came, indistinctly to my ears, what might have been the echo of the very cracking and ripping sound which Sir Lancelot had so particularly described. It was, beyond doubt, the coincidence alone which had arrested my attention, for the sound in itself had nothing, surely, which should have interested or disturbed me. I continued the story.
But the good champion Ethelred, now entering within the door, was sore enraged and amazed to perceive no signal of the maliceful hermit, but, in the stead thereof, a dragon of a scaly and prodigious demeanor, and of a fiery tongue, which sat in guard before a palace of gold, with a floor of silver, and upon the wall there hung a shield of shining brass, with this legend enwritten, Who entereth herein a conqueror hath been, who slayeth the dragon, the shield he shall win. And Ethelred uplifted his mace and struck upon the head of the dragon, which fell before him and gave up his pesty breath, with a shriek so horrid and harsh, and withal so piercing, that Ethelred had fain to close his ears with his hands against the dreadful noise of it, the like whereof was never before heard.
Here again I paused abruptly, and now with a feeling of wild amazement, for there could be no doubt whatever that in this instant I did actually hear, although from what direction it proceeded I found it impossible to say, a low and apparently distant but harsh, protracted, and most unusual screaming or grating sound, the exact counterpart for what my fancy had already conjured up for the dragon's unnatural shriek, as described by the romancer.
Oppressed as I certainly was, I still retained sufficient presence of mind to avoid exciting, by any observation, the sensitive nervousness of my companion. I was by no means certain that he had noticed the sounds in question, although, assuredly, a strange alteration had taken place in his demeanor. From a position fronting my own, he had gradually brought round his chair so as to sit with his face to the door of the chamber. I could but partially perceive his features, although I saw that his lips trembled as if he were murmuring inaudibly. He rocked from side to side with a gentle yet constant and uniform sway. Having rapidly taken notice of all this, I resumed the narrative of Sir Lancelot, which thus proceeded.
And now, the champion, having escaped from the terrible fury of the dragon, bethinking himself of the brazen shield and of the breaking up of the enchantment which was upon it, removed the carcass from out of the way before him, and approached valorously over the silver pavement of the castle to where the shield was upon the wall, which in sooth tarried not for his full coming, but fell down at his feet upon the silver floor with a mighty, great, and terrible ringing sound.
No sooner had these syllables passed my lips than, as if a shield of brass had indeed at the moment fallen heavily upon a floor of silver, I became aware of a distinct, hollow, metallic, and clangorous, yet apparently muffled reverberation, Completely unnerved, I leapt to my feet, but the measured rocking movement of Usher was undisturbed.
Not hear it? Yes, I hear it, and have heard it. Long, many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it, yet I dare not. Oh, pity me, miserable wretch that I am. I dare not speak. We have put her living in the tomb. Said I not that my senses were acute? I now tell you that I heard her first feeble movements in the hollow coffin. I heard them many days ago, yet I dare not speak. And now, tonight, Ethelred, ha! The breaking of the hermit's door and the death cry of the dragon and the clangor of the shield, say rather the rendering of her coffin, the grating of the iron hinges of her prison, and her struggles within the coppered archway of the vault. Oh, whither shall I fly? Will she not be here anon? Is she not hurrying to upbraid me for my haste? Have I not heard her footstep on the stair? Do I not distinguish that heavy and horrible beating of her heart? Madman!
Here he sprang furiously to his feet and shrieked out his syllables as if in the effort he were giving up his soul.
Madman, I tell you that she now stands without the door.
As if in the superhuman energy of his utterance there had been found the potency of a spell, the huge antique panels to which the speaker pointed threw slowly back upon the instant, their ponderous and ebony jaws. It was the work of the rushing gust, did stand the lofty and enshrouded figure of the Lady Madeline of Usher.
There was blood upon her white robes, and the evidence of some bitter struggle upon every portion of her emaciated frame. For a moment she remained trembling and reeling to and fro upon the threshold, then, with a low moaning cry, fell heavily inward upon the person of her brother, and in her violent and now final death agonies, bore him to the floor a corpse, and a victim to the terrors he had anticipated.
From that chamber, and from that mansion, I fled aghast. The storm was still abroad in all its wrath as I found myself crossing the old causeway.
Suddenly there shot along the path a wild light, and I turned to see whence a gleam so unusual could have issued, for the vast house and its shadows were alone behind me.
The radiance was that of the full setting and blood-red moon which now shone vividly through that once barely discernible fissure of which I had before spoken, as extending from the roof of the building in a zigzag direction to the base.
While I gazed, this fissure rapidly widened. There came a fierce breath of the whirlwind. The entire orb of the satellite burst at once upon my sight. My brain reeled as I saw the mighty walls rushing asunder.
There was a long, tumultuous shouting sound like the voice of 1,000 waters, and the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the House of Usher. The end.
And that was the Citrus Club Podcast.